Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere a little grim, but don't worry, you're already doomed. Imagine a coastline lined with jagged stone, winds that never stop complaining, and a sky so gray it might sue the sun for abandonment. That's your new home. A Viking fishing village tucked along the chilly fjords of early medieval Scandinavia. The waves slap against your ankles with all the affection of a dead mackerel, and the air smells like kelp, sweat, and the kind of fish that's been thinking about retirement for too long. You're not here for pillaging or swordplay. No, your destiny is less glamorous and far wetter. You're here to fish and freeze, and probably wish you hadn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're already cold before the day begins. Not the polite kind of cold either, the sort that's in your bones before your feet hit the ground. There's no mattress under you, just straw that's damp enough to imply someone else has used it for something recent. The blanket you've been given is more of a suggestion than a textile. Thin, scratchy, and entirely symbolic. Your room is a corner of a longhouse filled with more people than seem logistically advisable. Snoring, farting, muttering in Old Norse. You don't understand the language, but you understand despair. You try to roll over only to realize you've tangled yourself in your own tunic, which is somehow damp despite your best efforts to stay horizontal. Remember that feeling. It'll be with you for the next 14 sections. Outside, it's still technically night, though the sliver of pale blue on the horizon insists that the long gray of northern morning is on its way. A rooster crows, although it sounds like it regrets doing so. You sit up, spine audibly complaining, and look around. People are already beginning to stir, stretching, scratching, stepping over each other in practiced silence. A few are wrapping themselves in furs. Others are just tying up their boots and moving straight into the mist. You have no idea what you're supposed to do, but there's no coffee, no toothpaste, no quiet quitting. You're on Viking time now, and the village runs on fish, obligation, and the looming threat of communal shame. You stumble outside. The chill hits your face like a personal insult. Your breath fogs in front of you, but it's quickly lost to the wind that rolls in from the sea. Around you, the world is painted in muted browns, stone grays, and sea foam greens. It's not ugly, just apathetic. Even the trees look like they gave up halfway through growing. A narrow path winds between turf-roofed huts, most made from timber, so weathered it probably has opinions. The roofs sag slightly under the weight of old snow and newer moss. People nod at you as you pass, or at least you think they do. It's hard to tell through the beard density. The village itself is perched on a slight rise above the fjord. Below, you see the shoreline, several longboats pulled up onto the rocks, nets draped across wooden racks, and a group of men already working. A woman nearby is hacking at something with a knife. You do not look closely. As you shuffle toward the docks, the mud grabs at your shoes like it knows you're new. Every few steps, your foot sticks, and you nearly lose a boot. A child runs past you barefoot, laughing. You consider crying. You do not. Reaching the dock, you're greeted with your first task. Lug a net soaked in salt water, guts, and disappointment. From one rack to another. The man who gestures at you doesn't speak, but he doesn't need to. His tone is universal. You're already doing it wrong. The net weighs roughly as much as a small horse and smells like an argument. You drag it where he points. The cold water runs down your sleeves, settling into the crook of your elbow like it's found a new home. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so are your neighbors, historically speaking. A historical fact. Viking. Fishing villages like this one were economic lifelines, not backwaters. They weren't just full of rugged loners. They were key providers of dried fish to inland settlements. Cod, herring, and eel were preserved using techniques that involved smoke, salt, and thyme. Unfortunately, none of these methods involve being kind to your hands. As you finish dragging the net, someone hands you a knife and a pair of stiff leather gloves. You're ushered to a barrel. Inside, fish, hundreds of them. Your job? Gut them, all of them, preferably before your fingers freeze solid. A fringe. Historical tidbit: some Viking fishers used their teeth to help strip smaller catches when knives dulled. You will not be trying that. Your fingers go numb about halfway through the second fish. The knife slips, catches your glove, and narrowly avoids adding you to the day's haul. You keep going. No one offers help. You don't blame them. You wouldn't help you either. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing in a low, gravelly voice. It's not pleasant, but it's oddly soothing, like a lullaby composed entirely of threats. As the sun climbs, as the gray gets slightly lighter, you catch your first full view of the fjord. The water is deep, steel blue, and full of secrets. You spot one of the longboats setting off. 6 men rowing in silence. Their backs are bent with effort, and their breath rises in rhythmic bursts. You'll be joining them later. Don't worry, you won't like it. A sharp cry pulls your attention back to shore. A gull swoops down, steals a fish from someone's pile, and is promptly cursed at in Norse. You think? Or maybe they were cursing at you. Either way, the gull wins. Historians still argue whether these villages were truly as harsh and insular as they seem, or whether we're misreading them through modern misery goggles. But judging by your frozen toes and the fact that your breakfast will probably be smoked herring again, you lean toward accurate. The morning passes in a blur of bad smells and worse posture. You try to straighten up, but your back seizes. You attempt to smile, but your face is stiff with cold. You fantasize about modern conveniences, electric blankets, central heating, a microwave burrito. Instead, you get a pat on the shoulder and a gesture toward a bucket. You're promoted. To cleanup. Congratulations, you've survived your first 2 hours. Kind of. Remember that damn tunic? It's still there. It's always been there. Breakfast is served, if that's the word you want to use. You're handed a chunk of hard rye bread that could double as construction material and a cup of lukewarm fish broth. It smells like seawater that gave up. The woman who gives it to you nods solemnly, as if she's gifting you something sacred. You nod back, even though you're 90% sure there's a fisheye staring at you from the surface. You stand near the fire pit with the others, gripping your cup like it's coffee, even though the warmth is more spiritual than actual. The bread crumbles, in your mouth like dusted regret. No butter, no jam, no mercy. Your jaw protests with every chew. The broth doesn't help. It tastes like someone boiled their boots in it. You sip slowly, trying not to make a face, but someone notices anyway. They laugh. You're officially the morning entertainment. Nearby, someone eats dried fish with their fingers, flaking it directly into their mouth with a practiced ease. You try the same. A piece sticks to your thumb and won't come off. You're now battling. A herring in public. There's no such thing as a leisurely morning here. You don't get to sit by the hearth and ponder your dreams. Breakfast is a fuel stop before more discomfort. Before you can finish chewing, someone barks an order and points toward the beach. You head down, slipping slightly on seaweed-covered rocks. The tide is lower now, revealing barnacle-clustered boulders and pools full of slippery things that don't want to be looked at. Your job, apparently, is gathering bait, specifically wormy little sea creatures from the rocks. You're handed a wooden scoop and a basket that leaks. As you squat beside the tide pools, the wind picks up. Your tunic flaps like a wet flag, and your knees begin to ache almost immediately. A crab scuttles past and gives you a look that feels judgmental. You ignore it and dig. Slime coats your fingers. Your nose runs. You can't feel your toes. Modern comparison. Remember that one time your food delivery took so long that your phone battery died? Now imagine it took 4 months, arrived frozen, and you had to catch it yourself while a seabird laughed at you. A historical fact. Vikings weren't just warriors. They were prolific seafarers and subsistence workers. Coastal villages like this thrived on a mix of fishing, seaweed gathering, and marine trapping. The line between work and survival was so thin, it may as well have been algae. As you gather bait, an old man walks past with a bucket of guts and doesn't bother to warn you before dumping it into the sea beside you. You're splashed. You're baptized. You smell like last night's regret. Back on shore, your hands are raw. Someone gestures toward a small lean-to where several villagers are gathered around a table. You walk over, hoping for warmth, but instead find what looks like a dissection party. They're making fish sausage. A fringe historical tidbit, some Norse communities ground up entire fish, bones, eyeballs, and all, to preserve every ounce of protein. You will now be helping. You're handed a bowl and a blunt spoon. The mixture you're expected to stir resembles gray paste flecked with despair. The smell punches you in the sinuses. You stir anyway because that's what everyone else is doing. The person next to you coughs into their hand, wipes it on their tunic, and keeps working. You do not make eye contact with your future breakfast. Someone tells you to taste it. They don't speak English, but the motion is clear. You smile awkwardly and pretend to take a bite. You have never lied so hard with your eyes. As midday approaches, the sun never quite arrives, just a brighter shade of gray. You're told it's time for the mid-meal, not lunch, just a pause. You sit with the others near the hearth again, knees to chest, watching steam rise from clay mugs filled with something even less identifiable than before. You sip. It's vaguely sour, vaguely fishy, and vaguely warm, like sadness but drinkable. Someone plays a simple tune on a bone flute. The notes drift in the smoky air, a lopsided lullaby. You realize you're actually beginning to feel peaceful. Is this Stockholm Syndrome, or just the first sign of hypothermia? Historians still argue whether Norse daily life was relentlessly grim or simply rugged by necessity. The sagas talk of feasting, mead, and revelry, but that's like judging your week based on your birthday party. The truth is, most days were like this: hard, cold, repetitive, and sticky. Speaking of sticky, you've now discovered fish scales in your sleeves, your hair, and somehow between your teeth, despite not eating any. Your hands are cracked, your lips are chapped, and your tunic is damp in entirely new places. But the worst is yet to come. You're told it's time to haul the morning's catch. The boat's been dragging in the nets, and now it's your turn to help unload. Down by the water, a heap of fish, still flopping, still judging, waits to be sorted. You squat next to the pile and begin. Your fingers protest, your back throbs, and a seagull steals one from your pile the moment you look away. You swear under your breath, in English. No one understands you, but a nearby woman pats your shoulders sympathetically. Then she grabs a fish, smashes its head on a rock, and keeps working. You nod, unsure whether that was encouragement or foreshadowing. Remember that damp tunic? It's still damp, and now it smells like betrayal. Evening creeps in without ceremony. The light fades, and with it, the temperature. A wind picks up off the water, bringing with it the smell of brine and rot. You're allowed to go warm up for a moment. Inside the longhouse, a fire crackles weakly. Smoke clings to everything. You sit near the hearth, holding your hands out to the flame. They barely register the heat. A child sneezes on you. No one says, "Bless you." There is no "bless you" here. Dinner is the same as breakfast, possibly literally. You eat it anyway. As you settle into your straw corner, knees aching, clothes stiff with salt, and belly uncomfortably full of unidentifiable protein, you begin to understand the depth of what you've agreed to. This isn't a sleepover, it's survival. With fish, the cold is clever. It waits until you're just barely asleep, then finds your ankles. It slithers under the hem of your tunic and tickles your ribs like a particularly vindictive ghost. You wake with a start, disoriented, nose stuffed, and mouth tasting faintly of smoke and despair. Around you, the longhouse still hums with nocturnal life, snoring, shifting, someone mumbling what may be prayers or curses. You blink into the darkness, unsure if it's still night or just a darker version of morning. You curl up tighter, tucking your hands under your arms, trying to steal your own body heat like it's contraband. A small part of you aches for central heating. Another part aches for literally everything else. You eventually drift back into a half-sleep state where your dreams involve swimming in fish guts or getting pecked by gulls with your mother's voice. Comforting. When you wake again, the longhouse is already stirring. No one announces the day. There is no rooster this time, just the rustle of bodies rising, boots being tugged on, and the thud of a bucket being kicked over. You yawn into your sleeve and try to pretend this is fine. It isn't. Outside, the wind has teeth. It gnaws at your ears as you trudge toward the docks, pulled by the momentum of those ahead of you. Today, you're going fishing, for real. You're assigned a boat, one of the smaller ones, but still intimidating. It rocks gently on the tide, and you realize just how little you trust wood that's older than most countries. You're handed an oar. It's sticky. You don't ask why. A historical fact: Viking fishing boats were marvels of practical design, light, flexible, and capable of handling both the open sea and shallow fjords. But they had no shelter, no cushion, and no mercy. You climb aboard with all the grace of a newborn moose and take your place at the side. The rowers begin without ceremony. You do your best to mimic them, but the motion is foreign and immediately exhausting. Your arms ache within minutes. Your lower back files a formal complaint. The wind whips your hair into your eyes, and salty. Spray stings your cheeks. The boat dips, rises, dips again. Your stomach joins the rebellion. You clutch your oar and try to look useful. No one says anything, but one of the men hands you a rope instead. You've been silently demoted. Eventually, you reach deeper waters. The men begin casting lines and nets with the kind of expertise that makes you feel like a third shoe. Your task is to hold the bait basket. It smells worse now somehow, like fermented regret. A gull lands on the edge of the boat. You make eye contact. It screams at you. You scream back quietly. Then the waiting begins. Fishing, it turns out, is mostly sitting in the wind and trying not to cry. You shift your weight every few minutes, but the boat moves with you in ways that make balance feel like a suggestion. Your feet are numb, your hands are locked into permanent claws. You fantasize about throwing yourself overboard, but the water looks worse than the boat. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so are your expectations. The first catch comes in a rush of motion. Nets pulled, fish flapping, voices raised. You try. To help, grabbing a line and immediately getting a splash of seawater to the face. Congratulations. You taste the ocean now, and possibly a fish's afterthoughts. One of the men shows you how to unhook the catch. It involves a sharp knife, a quick twist, and an expression of casual brutality. You copy him badly. The fish escapes. You apologize to no one in particular. A fringe historical tidbit. Some Viking fishers believed that specific chants or words could either bless or curse a catch. You hear someone muttering as they handle the fish. You try to mimic it. You are told to stop. Hours pass. The boat bobs endlessly. Your knees have locked. Your shoulders are screaming. Your sense of time has fractured. The sun makes a brief guest appearance behind a cloud, then leaves again, unimpressed. You close your eyes and pretend you're on a beach vacation. Then, a fish slaps your leg. Vacation's over. You begin to hallucinate the smell of coffee. You think about coffee so hard your brain invents a hot mug in your hands. You sip. It's fish broth. You cry. Historians still argue whether these fishing trips were communal bonding experiences or slow-motion punishments. The line is blurry. You are too tired to care. When the catch is deemed sufficient, the boat turns back toward shore. The rowing resumes. You are not asked to help. Your arms are jelly, your hands blistered. You grip the side of the boat and focus. On not vomiting, the gull returns. It watches you with disappointment. Back on land, you spill out of the boat like laundry. Someone laughs. You don't blame them. You look like a wet ghost in borrowed clothes. You're told to carry a basket of fish to the storage hut. You do so, wobbling under the weight. The path is rocky, and halfway there, a fish flops out. You go back for it. It flops again. You consider leaving it, but a stern-faced elder catches your eye. You retrieve the fish. Your spine files for divorce. Inside the storage hut, the air is thick with salt and smoke. Rows of fish hang like slippery laundry, drying on wooden poles. You add yours to the collection, then sit on a crate, unsure if you're allowed to. Someone hands you a skin of something alcoholic. You take a sip. It's sharp, strong, and instantly warms your throat. You smile. The man nods. For a moment, you're almost a Viking. Then you stand up and your knees betray you. Back in the longhouse, the fire feels like heaven. You sit close, hands outstretched, flexing your fingers slowly. They no longer feel like yours. Dinner is stew. You recognize some of the fish. You eat anyway. That night, as you lie on your straw mat, muscles throbbing and stomach gurgling, you wonder if you'll ever feel dry again. You won't, not here. And remember that tunic? Still damp. Now with added fish juice. You wake up gasping, not from a nightmare, but from your own body staging a protest. Every muscle aches in new and elaborate ways, like each fiber tried inventing its own Viking saga overnight. You try to stretch and immediately regret it. Your spine crackles like a badly built ladder. Your neck is stiff, your calves are cramping, and your face feels crusted with something. Probably a mixture of seawater, ash, and yesterday's failure. Your hands are swollen. That's new. Or maybe they've always been like this, and the pain is just now forming a personality. There's a chill to the air again. Of course there is. The fire burned low in the night, and someone's used your only source of warmth, your scratchy blanket, as a pillow for their feet. You consider retaliation, but the concept of movement feels like too big an ask. Eventually, you lurch upright and stumble toward the daylight, seeping through the wooden slats. Today, you're told, is a sacred one. Not in the sense of rest, don't be silly. It's sacred in the way fermented fish is sacred, unpleasant, inevitable, and soaked in tradition. The cod god demands sacrifice. A historical fact, Norse seafarers often practiced rituals or offerings before major fishing expeditions. While not necessarily religious in the organized sense, these rites were deeply spiritual, anchored in appeasing sea spirits, invoking fertility for the catch, or simply warding off a very real fear of drowning. You're ushered to the beach, where several villagers stand in a wide circle around a small pile of dried herbs, animal bones, and what may once have been a chicken. Smoke curls upward from a bowl held by a woman whose face is almost entirely hidden under a fur hood. She chants slowly, rhythmically. It sounds like a lullaby composed of warnings. You're handed a dried cod head. No one explains. You're simply expected to know what to do. You look around and mimic the others. Kneel, bow, press the head to your forehead, then toss it into the fire. The scent is something you'll never forget or forgive. A fringe historical tidbit in some Norse fishing communities, fermented fish heads were not just ritual objects, but delicacies offered during feasts. You wonder who first decided to ferment a head and call it dinner. Probably someone who didn't survive long. The ritual continues. Someone draws patterns in the sand using an eel spine. You try not to stare. A child offers a bundle of seaweed tied with a bit of string. Everyone claps softly. You follow suit despite having no idea what just happened. Historians still argue whether these seaside rites were spiritual theater or practical superstition. Were the villagers truly communicating with the gods of the sea, or were they just trying to give meaning to a terrifying, dangerous lifestyle? Either way, you've now participated in a sacred act involving rotting fish and cryptic mumbling. Congrats. After the ritual, it's back to labor. No one talks about what just happened. It's as though you took part in a shared dream, one that smelled distinctly of cod and smoke. Today's task is prepping the drying racks. The fish caught yesterday need to be cleaned, again, salted generously, and strung up awkwardly. You're handed a knife with a handle worn smooth from years of handling. It barely cuts butter, let alone fish skin. You do your best. You split one open down the middle and nearly fling it into your own lap. The flesh is cold and rubbery. The innards squelch with a sound that haunts you immediately. Still, you persist. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your sense of smell. It's probably for the best. Salt is poured into barrels and rubbed onto the fillets with thick hands. You try to help but rub too hard and tear the fish. A nearby man grunts. You apologize and do it again anyway. Your gloves are soaked. Your fingernails are lined with brine and scales. You drape each fish over the wooden racks, horizontal beams stretched between tall poles. They hang like flags of surrender, hundreds of them, all slowly transforming into something that will one day be eaten, traded, or regretted. The sun peers briefly through the clouds, and you feel a flicker of warmth. Then it disappears again, like it remembered it had somewhere better to be. By mid-morning, you're allowed to take a break, which means you squat in the mud and chew a strip of dried fish jerky that has the consistency of roofing tile. You tear off a bite and immediately regret it. Your jaw clicks, your eyes water. You swallow anyway. Remember the fish sausage from the other day? It's back. Someone passes you a slice wrapped in leaf. You accept, trying to be polite. It tastes like smoke, sourness, and a hint of revenge. A child offers you a tiny carved cod made from driftwood. You accept it. It's oddly comforting. Something about the round little eyes and smooth edges makes you feel slightly human again. You tuck it into your tunic. Of course, your tunic is still damp, but now it holds a talisman. That's progress. Your next assignment is to clean the sacrificial site. The cod heads have mostly burned to charcoal, but the smell lingers like a rude guest. You rake the ashes into the sea. The tide washes over them with disinterest as you work. You notice a group of villagers standing near a circle of stones. They're exchanging items, fish, small bones, strings of beads. It's a kind of bartering ritual. No coin, just trade. You edge closer and watch. A historical fact: Viking economies ran heavily on barter. In rural fishing communities, dried fish became currency, traded for cloth, tools, or labor. You witness a man hand over 6 perfectly smoked herring in exchange for a wooden comb. You do not ask for a refund on your time. You're invited to join the bartering, sort of. A woman gestures at your boots and makes a trade offer. A scrap of wool cloth for your shoes. You decline, politely but firmly. She shrugs. You immediately regret it. Your boots are filled with cold sand again. That afternoon, you're asked to help repair one of the fishing racks. It's tilted dangerously. After a windstorm, you're given a mallet and a handful of wooden pegs. You have no idea what to do with either. You hammer one peg straight into your thumb. You do not scream. You do, however, emit a quiet whimper. The others fix the rack while you sit on a rock and hold your thumb dramatically. No one offers sympathy. One man tosses you a lump of something. Soft, it's moss. You use it as a compress. Surprisingly effective. Historians still debate the extent to which Viking societies cared for minor injuries. Some believe practical herbalism and folk remedies were widespread. Others think you just rubbed dirt on it and got back to work. Judging by your current situation, the latter feels more accurate. As dusk settles, you help carry bundles of dried fish to a storage cave dug into the hillside. The air inside is thick and still with a hint of mildew. The floor is layered in old reeds. The walls are damp. The silence is heavy. You realize this is the village's pantry, stronghold, and emergency reserve. These fish are survival, salted, hung, smoked, or stacked. You return to the longhouse late, your arms trembling, your stomach clenched in anticipation of, well, more fish. Dinner is stew again, this time with something floating in it that may have once been an onion. You don't ask. As you lie down that night, your thumb still throbbing, your clothes stiff from salt, and the carved cod tucked near your chest, you feel not content, exactly, but present. You have sacrificed, you have salted, you have learned that the cod God takes but occasionally gives, like damp dreams and wooden fish charms, and your tunic, still damp, still your problem. The morning fog clings to your skin before you've even made it outside. You don't wake so much as rise from a damp coma. Your body feels heavier today, less sore, but somehow more defeated, as if your bones have joined the general strike. Your tunic, as expected, is still damp. In fact, it may now be more water than fabric. Outside, the mist rolls over the fjord, like it's auditioning for a poetry contest. Visibility is low. The village seems smaller in the haze, more isolated, like it's floating on the edge of the known world, which, to be fair, it kind of is. Today's lesson is tools, not the glamorous kind with gears and craftsmanship. No, you're going to get intimate with hooks, nets, stones, and a terrifying object called a leister. It looks like a fork designed by someone who hates fish and safety. A historical fact: Viking fishers used a variety of specialized tools, including weighted nets, iron hooks, bone lures, and multi-pronged spears like the leister. These were often handmade, maintained communally, and treated with almost sacred respect. You're taken to the tool shed, or more accurately, a half-sheltered pile of objects that vaguely resemble instruments of labor. Nets hang like cobwebs. Spears lean against walls. There's a smell of oil, fish grease, and something faintly metallic like old coins or future tetanus. Your first task is mending. You're handed a needle the size of your hand and a coil of coarse twine. A net sprawls in front of you, filled with holes, tangles, and secrets. You sit on a low stool, thread the twine, and begin weaving. It takes about 3 seconds to prick your finger. You bleed. You dab it on your tunic, which doesn't notice. Your stitches are uneven. Your mentor, a woman with arms like anchor ropes, grunts disapprovingly. Well, you start over. As you struggle with the net, your mind wanders. You wonder what your modern self would post right now. Day 5 of Viking Survivor, still no coffee, might eat a pebble. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your dignity. Someone teaches you how to check for weak spots by running your hand along the netting and listening for a particular sound, like a high-pitched whine when fibers are too tight or too dry. You pretend you hear it. You do not. Next, it's time for the hooks. You're handed a pouch containing several small, wickedly curved iron hooks and a strip of bone. You're shown how to sharpen them using a river stone. It's oddly meditative, dragging the edge along the grit, watching sparks if the angle is right. Your fingers slowly remember precision. You lose yourself in the rhythm. Then, you drop one. It lands point first in your foot, thankfully into the boot, unthankfully through the boot. You yelp. Everyone ignores you. You're upgraded, no, reassigned to the leister. It's explained to you with a series of gestures and a few words that sound like they come from a different century. You hold it like a spear, then like a rake, then like a pool cue. Eventually, someone takes pity and shows you how to jab it into the sand beside a tide pool, where small fish might hide. You jab, nothing happens. You jab again, still nothing. You jab a third time and hit a rock. The leister reverberates like a tuning fork, and your arms go numb. You hear someone laugh softly behind you, a fringe historical tidbit. The leister wasn't just a tool, it was a status symbol. Owning a well-made one meant you were trusted, skilled, and slightly terrifying in a fight. You, on the other hand, look like you're stabbing the earth out of spite. Eventually, you do spear something, a tiny wriggling fish. It dangles off the prong, staring at you in what you swear is quiet contempt. You name it Gary and offer a brief apology before tossing it into a bucket. From there, it's back to sorting. Fish bones from the refuse pile must be cleaned for reuse. Some are carved into needles, others into toggles, buttons, or even ornaments. You're given a bone and a flint tool and asked to shave it smooth. The bone slips and cuts your palm. You're now bleeding from 2 hands. This is fine. Historians still argue whether tool making was a gendered activity in Viking fishing villages. Some say women managed household tools and net repairs, while men handled spears and hooks. Others suggest the division was purely based on who had the least frostbite that morning. Based on your current state, you suspect no one had time to care? By midday, your fingers are raw, your legs have gone stiff from crouching, and your stomach grumbles like an old dog. Lunch is surprise cold fish. This time, it's been buried in salt for several days and tastes like sadness with a hint of leather. You chew slowly, looking out over the water, watching boats bob in the distance. A seagull poops on your sleeve. No one helps. You return to the shed for cleaning duties. The tools must be rinsed, dried, and oiled. You're handed a rag and a jar of something that smells like whale and beeswax. You polish a knife until it gleams. You feel briefly powerful. Then you slice your thumb open again. Congratulations. You are now bleeding from 3 hands. You wrap it with moss again. Your tunic is now a full crime scene. You think longingly of Band-Aids, hand sanitizer, and a world where your clothes aren't biohazards. The wind picks up in the afternoon, and the shed creaks ominously. A gust sends a rack of hooks tumbling. You dodge them narrowly. A nearby child claps. You bow. By early evening, you've learned more than you expected. Not about tools, but about the limits of human endurance. Your fingers ache, your eyes burn, and your hair smells like iron and regret. You've sharpened, mended, scraped, and bled. You've also started naming the tools: Big Pokey, Net Regret, Slicey. It's helping. As night falls, you sit by the fire. With the others, hands resting on your knees, eyes heavy. You notice they're using the same tools you touched. Now cleaned, gleaming, part of the cycle. You belong, a little. Your tunic, still damp. But it has character now. You wake with the kind of dull, aching fatigue that feels stitched into your body, like every muscle has been sewn into the straw mat beneath you. There's no alarm, no sunrise you can actually see, just a creeping, gray glow leaking through the seams in the longhouse walls, and the ambient rustle of others already getting up, scraping benches, coughing into the cold. You try stretching, but your spine responds with a symphony of muted pops and tight resistance. Your fingers are stiff, your knees complain, and that one spot behind your left shoulder feels like it was cursed overnight. You sit up slowly, peeling your damp tunic away from your skin with the reluctant suction of soggy linen. It's still wet, of course. It will always be wet. If this tunic ever dries, you suspect Ragnarok is upon us. Outside, the air hits you like a wet slap. The mist is thicker than yesterday, like the sky is apologizing for its mood with fog instead of warmth. Everything looks softer, but colder, like the whole village has been dipped in diluted milk. There's no question of what happens next. You're going out on the boat again, and this time, it's not for training or helping. You're expected to row, really row. You're herded down to the shore with a few others, most of them larger, broader, with hands that look like they've been carved from driftwood and weather. No one explains anything. You're handed an oar and pointed toward a long, narrow boat rocking gently against the tide. You step in, clumsily, almost tipping. The thing before someone steadies it behind you. There are no seats, no backrests, just a narrow beam to sit on and the promise of pain. A historical fact. Viking fishing boats, unlike their grander longship cousins used for raids, were smaller, open-hulled vessels built for coastal waters. They were made of overlapping planks and sealed with tar, efficient but unkind to the spine. Your job is to row in unison, matching the rhythm of the man at the front, who taps the side of the boat with a short stick every few seconds. You start slowly, dipping the oar into the icy water and pulling back. The motion is simple, but the weight is not. With every stroke, your arms burn a little more, and your lower back begins to hum with the low whine of a coming rebellion. There's no banter, just breath and water. The boat slips through the fjord, cutting the surface in long, silent strokes. Mist curls off the water like smoke. The air tastes of salt fish and wet wool. The occasional seagull screeches overhead, and one of them relieves itself on the side of the boat. No one reacts. Apparently, this is just part of the experience. Your legs cramp, your hands blister. You think about stopping, but the man beside you rows with the unbothered momentum of someone who's done this since childhood. You keep going. The cold seeps in around your wrists and ankles, rising like a quiet threat. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your sense of time. Eventually, after what feels like hours, or maybe just enough strokes to question your life choices, the boat slows near a rocky outcrop in deeper water. Nets are brought out, long, tangled, heavy things that smell like mildew and old kelp. You're told to help throw one overboard. It takes both hands and all your weight. When the net hits the water, it drags down fast, disappearing into the dark like a ghost looking for dinner. You're handed a rope, told to hold it, and not much else. So you sit, damp, sore, clutching wet rope, and watching mist settle over everything. The silence is complete. Even the gulls have stopped complaining. Fringe historical tidbit. Some Norse communities believed that fish could sense the energy of the fishermen. Calm minds brought calm catches. Angry minds brought storms. You try to think peaceful thoughts, a hot bath, a dry towel, a sandwich. Instead, you think about how your hands have gone completely numb and your lips are cracking from the salt air. When the net is ready to be hauled back, it takes all of you working together. The rope bites into your palms. The net rises slowly, heaving with silver shapes, thrashing and flopping and gasping. Fish spill into the boat in a violent, slapping rhythm. Water sprays your face. You taste salt and scales. One fish flips into your lap, stares at you briefly with cold clarity, then slides away. Historians still debate whether these fishing trips were deeply spiritual events or just another hard day's work in an endless cycle of toil. For you, it's starting to feel like both, equal parts penance and punishment. The boat grows heavier with every new fish, and your body feels lighter from exhaustion. By the time the catch is in, you're trembling, soaked, and aching in places you didn't know could ache. And now it's time to row back. You don't remember the journey to shore. Your arms move on instinct, your eyes blur, and your thoughts drift somewhere between regret and muscle memory. When the boat hits land, you're hauled out like part of the catch blinking against the light. A man slaps your back, perhaps in congratulations or perhaps to help you breathe again. You don't ask. You stumble up the beach and are handed a crate of fish to carry. Of course you are. The crate digs into your arms. The fish are still flopping. The trail back up to the village is slick with mud, and your boots squelch with every step. You fall once, maybe twice. You're too tired to count. When you reach the storage hut, someone opens the door with a nod, and you unload your catch, with the delicacy of a person trying not to throw up. By evening, you're allowed to sit by the fire for longer than usual. You're not sure if it's a reward or just that no one needs you to do anything else today. You sip hot broth that tastes only vaguely like fish and smoke. You don't talk, no one does. The silence is comfortable, full of the soft crackle of flame and the occasional sigh. You sit still watching the fire, thinking about how rowing might have aged you 5 years in one day. And just as you're about to stand, you realize your body has locked up. Your thighs refuse to participate. Your shoulders whisper threats. Your hands twitch involuntarily. Someone hands you a small chunk of dried apple, a rare treat. You chew, slowly, savoring the sour sweetness, like it's a royal feast. And that tunic? Still damp. Still part of you now. You're not sure where you end and it begins. You'll row again tomorrow. That's not a question. It's a certainty. And strangely, somewhere beneath the fatigue and salt, you begin to accept it. You wake to the sound of someone sharpening a blade. It's not a threatening sound exactly, more like a coarse rhythm, like someone sanding down a memory. The scraping continues for several minutes, steady and unbothered, as you blink into the dimness of the longhouse, still wrapped in the humid embrace of your eternally damp tunic. Your body feels like it has aged a decade overnight. Muscles you don't remember owning have announced their presence with soreness. Your lower back pulses with quiet resentment, and your shoulders feel like they've been used to anchor a ship. In a storm, it's not even light out yet. The fire has burned low, and the air inside the longhouse is a murky mix of smoke, unwashed wool, dried fish, and regret. Someone sneezes. No one says, "Bless you." That's not how mornings work here. You step outside, hoping for air, and immediately regret it. The chill is sharp today, edged with the kind of wind that makes your ears ring. A gull shrieks overhead, as if confirming your discomfort. On the path to the docks, your boots sink slightly in the half-frozen mud, and your knees groan in protest with each step. A man gestures to you silently, then points to a small shack near the edge of the village. You follow, half-dreaming, and find yourself standing before the most dreaded task so far: fish gutting. The shack is filled with barrels of water, rows of knives, and tables already slick with the work of the early risers. You're handed a blade and pointed toward a large wooden trough filled with today's catch. Your job is to slit, scoop, rinse, repeat. A historical fact. In many Viking fishing villages, gutting and cleaning fish was a shared duty, done quickly and often in silence to prevent attracting scavenging animals. Speed was valued, as was precision. You needed to save as much flesh as possible while discarding what couldn't be smoked, dried, or salted. You begin awkwardly, trying not to look the fish in the eye. It doesn't help. Their expressions, frozen in whatever emotion fish feel at the end, all seem faintly accusatory. You brace the first one, press the knife into its belly, and pull. It slips. You nearly slice your own hand. You adjust your grip, try again, and this time you succeed in removing approximately 1/3 of what you were supposed to. Your hands are already cold, but now they're also wet and coated in a thin film of mucus and blood. You try wiping them on your apron, but it's made of leather, and the slime just sits there, taunting you. By your third fish, the smell begins to set in. It's not the clean, briny scent of the ocean. It's sour, metallic, and vaguely earthy, like something that grew teeth and then lost them. A fringe historical tidbit. In some Norse communities, children were taught to gut fish before they could walk steadily. You wonder if you would have survived toddlerhood here. After the first hour, your pace improves slightly, not because you're more skilled, but because you've stopped caring about technique. You get the job done. The guts go into a side bucket. The heads are separated. The bones are stacked for later use. You don't ask what the bones are for. You suspect it's something unsettling. The air in the shack is thick with steam from the nearby fire and the pungent odor of organs. You lose track of time quickly. Outside, the wind howls occasionally, and the walls creak in sympathy. Inside, you settle into a strange rhythm, Slice, scoop, flick, rinse. Your fingers go numb again. Your nose drips, a small splatter of fish. Blood lands near your mouth, and you just wipe it away without thinking. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your ability to feel disgust. One of the villagers, an older woman with sun-leathered skin and sharp eyes, sits beside you for a while. She works twice as fast, barely glancing at the fish, her hands moving with the bored efficiency of someone who has done this every day for 4 decades. She doesn't speak, but you feel her judgment. You're not offended, you agree with her. At one point, you try to stand and stretch, and your spine lets out a sound like a door hinge from a horror movie. You wince, then return to your position. No one else is taking a break. Eventually, someone brings in a fresh tub of fish, and everyone groans just barely above a whisper. The work continues. Historians still argue whether this sort of task was shared communally out of necessity or assigned along gender lines. What's clear is that it had to be done daily without fail, or the food would rot and winter would win. In a place where survival meant preservation, even the most unpleasant tasks were sacred in their own way. You work until your forearms tremble and your wrists lock up. When someone finally taps you on the shoulder and nods toward the door, you feel like a prisoner being released. Outside, the cold air somehow smells clean again. You breathe it in like a gift, even though your clothes are now soaked through with fish slime, and your apron feels like a second, stickier skin. Back at the longhouse, you're given a bowl of broth and a chunk of hard bread. You eat in silence. No one makes eye contact. Everyone smells the same. The fire crackles, indifferent to your suffering. You wipe your hands on a scrap of fur and stare into the flames. Your back aches. Your neck throbs. Your knuckles are raw. But you've learned something today. You can do ugly things for long periods of time and not die. Probably, that evening, you're tasked with dumping the waste buckets into a pit behind the shed. You gag twice on the way. The gulls swarm before you finish. One of them steals a gut and flies off in triumph. You salute it weakly. You return to your mat that night not with pride, but with resignation. You are no longer a guest. You are a cog. A sore, undertrained, miserable cog. Your hands still smell of fish despite scrubbing them in snow. You curl up under your damp blanket, your eyes heavy with sleep and salt, and try to remember what clean sheets feel like. And that tunic. Still damp, now with bonus smell. You wake up to the sensation of something crawling. Not a metaphor. Something is actually crawling on your leg, under your blanket, in that swampy no man's land where damp wool and human skin have long since formed a toxic alliance. You slap it away reflexively, feel a squish, and decide not to investigate. It's too early for that kind of existential crisis. The longhouse is quieter than usual this morning. The fire is just embers, the air inside more wet than warm. And your tunic, naturally, has evolved into a living ecosystem. You sit up and stretch, but it's a half-hearted gesture. Your joints refuse to cooperate, and your spine is still holding. A grudge from rowing duty. As you shuffle out into the open air, you're greeted not by cold, but by wind. A sharp, aggressive wind that grabs your hair and slaps your face like you owe it money. Today, you're told, is cleaning day. Not of your clothes, don't be ridiculous, but of the fish. Again. This time, though, you're not gutting. You're butchering, drying, and prepping for long-term storage. You follow the others to a large wooden structure that smells like history, salt, and defeat. Inside are rows and rows of fish hung from beams like morbid decorations. Your job. Prepare more. You're handed a dull knife, a thin glove with a hole in it, and a nod. That's your orientation. The fish have already been gutted, but now they need to be split, scraped, salted, and either smoked or hung. You take your position at a long bench, and within minutes, your hands are raw again. The knife doesn't so much cut as suggest a separation. You push down hard, feel the blade slip, and suddenly your thumb is bleeding. Again, you don't even react this time. You just suck on the cut and keep going. A historical fact: Vikings preserved their fish using a combination of air drying, cold smoking, and salting. Dried fish, especially cod, became a trade staple across northern Europe and remained edible for years if kept properly. You marvel at this as you scrape a stubborn fish scale from your cheek with your fingernail. You're then directed to the salting station, essentially a pit filled with brine and a layer of rough salt so coarse it feels like gravel. You lay the fish down one by one, packing salt between the layers, your fingernails now rimmed with white crystals and tiny cuts that sting like betrayal. You think briefly about modern food prep: gloves, aprons, clean stainless steel counters. You laugh quietly and bitterly. Here, your counter is an old plank with fish grease soaked into it, deeper than your will to live. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your sense of what day it is. Someone hands you a smoked fish to test. You chew it with the tentative hope of flavor. It tastes like firewood and rubber bands. You nod appreciatively anyway. It's important to maintain morale. A fringe historical tidbit: in some fishing villages, fish eyes were considered edible delicacies, especially in soups. You remember this as a small boy tosses a pair of eyes at you from across the room and laughs when they bounce off your chest. You don't laugh back, not because you're offended, just because your soul is temporarily out of office. After the fish are salted and stacked, you're sent to help with the drying racks. These are wooden poles elevated slightly above the ground, where gutted fish are hung in pairs by their tails to air dry in the wind. You're handed a bucket of prepped fish and a sharp stick used to poke holes through the tails. After 5 or 6 fish, the motion becomes automatic: hold, stab, loop, hang, repeat. You glance around at the others. No one speaks. No one needs to. It's not camaraderie exactly, it's shared inertia. Historians still argue whether these communal tasks created social bonds or just reinforced the village's survival machine. What's clear is that conversation isn't necessary when everyone is half frozen and smells like dead things. Around midday, the wind picks up even more. Fish sway slightly on the racks like a wind chime made by someone who hates you. Then it starts raining. At first, it's a drizzle, just enough to make everything slick again. Then it becomes a steady downpour, soaking your tunic, your hair, the fish, the ground. You keep working because stopping is worse. There's nowhere to go that's dry. Even the longhouse leaks at this point. You step in a puddle that didn't exist 5 seconds ago, and your boot squelches for the rest of the afternoon like an audible reminder of failure. You're eventually allowed to rest inside the smokehouse, which is warmer but smells like ancient barbecue and damp logs. You sit on an overturned bucket and let the steam rise from your clothes like you're being exercised. Someone hands you a small piece of dried seaweed. It's salty, chewy, and unexpectedly satisfying. You don't ask what's in it. You've stopped asking things altogether. You return to the racks when the rain eases up. The ground is now fully mud. Your boots disappear halfway to the ankle with each step, and one nearly stays behind. You dig it out with a stick and keep moving. Your hands are cramping. Your back is buzzing with fatigue. You hang the last few fish with the grace of someone holding back tears. A gull tries to steal one from the rack. You swat at it. It swats back. You lose. Dinner that night is, you guessed it, fish stew. You no longer care what kind. You eat it automatically, staring into the bowl like it holds answers. You think about your mattress at home, your dry sheets, the simple joy of a microwave. Then you bite down on something crunchy and remember you're not home. As you lie down that night, your arms twitch with phantom fish-lifting movements. You can still smell salt behind your ears. You try to sleep, but your dreams are full of flapping, bleeding, and the sound of scraping knives. And that tunic, still damp. Now with crusted brine along the seams, you wake up mid-snore, mouth open, tongue dry and your entire face stiff from a combination of dried fish grease and sleep crust. It's not a glamorous moment. The air in the longhouse is heavy this morning, less with warmth, more with shared exhaustion. No one says anything as they rise, just a chorus of joint pops, creaking floorboards, and a few soft curses muttered in old tongues. You sit up slowly, peeling your damp tunic from your body like you're shedding regret. It sticks in places. It shouldn't. You shuffle toward the door, step outside, and immediately wish you hadn't. The wind is sharp and wet, slicing sideways through the mist and catching you full in the face like a salty slap. You squint into the morning haze and see the village already in motion. Today, you're not going to the shore or the smokehouse or the gutting bench. Today, you're staying in the village, which sounds like a break until you're told what. You'll be doing watch duty, not the kind with swords or dramatic lookout towers. Your job is to observe quietly as the rest of the village moves around you and make sure nothing goes wrong. Spoiler, everything already feels wrong. You're handed a short stick, a sort of symbol of minor authority, and told to stand near the center of the village and look useful. You stand there awkwardly, shifting your weight from foot to foot, trying to seem alert while your eyelids rebel. A historical fact: Viking villages, especially fishing settlements, operated under deeply communal systems of behavior. There were no police per se, but there were always watchers, people assigned to oversee supplies, monitor trade, or simply keep an eye out for strangers. These roles rotated. Today it's your turn. No one trusts you yet, but they've run out of better options. At first, you just stand around. You try to look serious, maybe even mildly threatening, but you're wearing a damp tunic that smells like fermented regret and a stick that wouldn't scare a goat. A child walks past you carrying a bundle of fish bones. She doesn't even acknowledge you. A man carrying a basket of seaweed nods, but it feels like he's humoring you. You make a half salute with your stick. He keeps walking. Over time, you start noticing things. The rhythm of the village is surprisingly elegant beneath its grime. A group of women repair netting near the longhouse, fingers nimble and synchronized. A boy struggles to drag a bucket of water from the well, and two older men watch without helping, judging his technique. Someone chops firewood with terrifying precision, the blade landing the same spot over and over like a heartbeat. No one wastes motion. Everything, even the shuffling of old boots, seems to serve a purpose. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your ability to sit still. Every time you try leaning on the fence post, someone passes and gives you a look. Not angry, just disappointed. So you straighten up and try again to look authoritative. You twirl your stick once. It flies out of your hand, lands in the mud. You pick it up and try not to make eye contact with anyone. A group of fishermen returns from the morning catch. You watch as they unload. Quick, practiced, no words, just nods and gestures. You spot the elder who taught you to gut fish 2 days ago. He glances at you briefly, says nothing, and moves on. Somehow that feels worse than criticism, a fringe historical tidbit. Some Norse settlements used carved fishbone tokens as temporary markers of responsibility, passed from person to person, based on the task of the day. You wonder if your stick is one of those tokens, or just a broken broom handle they gave you to keep you busy. As the morning drags on, a strange thing happens. You start to feel invisible. No one really talks to you. No one checks in. You're there, part of the scenery, and maybe that's what they wanted. Another pair of eyes, another moving body, another soul slowly surrendering to the pace of village life. You watch two boys argue over a basket of dried cod. One smacks the other. No one intervenes. It resolves itself with a grunt and a shove. Around midday, you're finally given a more active task. An elder woman gestures for you to follow her to the storage shed. Inside you find barrels, baskets, ropes, and bundles of herbs hanging from the rafters. She hands you a bundle of dried fish tied with string and points to a crate of beads. You realize eventually that she's preparing items for trade. You'll be assisting, You help carry goods to a small circle near the village edge where barter takes place. No money changes hands, just goods for goods. One man offers a bundle of sea salt in exchange for smoked herring. Another trades a carved bone needle for a patch of clean wool. You hold the fish bundle while the elder woman negotiates quietly, sternly, with a man who smells like pine and hasn't shaved in what may be a calendar year. He gives her 2 iron nails. She grunts approval. You nod like you understand. Historians still argue whether trade in these communities was strictly utilitarian or if social politics played a role. Did favors matter more than weight? Did grudges affect the value of salt? Either way, it's clear that this village's economy runs not on coin, but on familiarity, scarcity, and subtle power plays. You stand there with your fish absorbing all of it, trying not to drop anything or sneeze. Later, back inside the storage shed, you help sort what's left. You stack bundles of dried fish in neat rows, count bones, and accidentally stab yourself with a fishhook buried in straw. You say nothing. No one would care. You wrap your finger in a piece of old cloth and keep going. By late afternoon, your shift ends. No one announces it. You just find yourself with nothing else to carry. You set the stick down near the longhouse door and sit by the fire, stretching your legs out, sighing louder than you meant to. No one tells you to be quiet. Dinner that night is fish soup again, thick and oily, but warmer than usual. You eat with fewer complaints. Your fingers are sore, your back tight, but for the first time in days, your clothes don't feel like they're trying to dissolve. You've earned a quiet moment. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen to the soft murmurs around the room, the clinking of wooden bowls, the hiss of the hearth, and the tunic, still damp. But now it smells like trade, like labor, like you've finally soaked into the fabric of the village, whether you meant to or not. You wake up with a familiar pressure in your abdomen, one that modern plumbing would resolve in 30 seconds. But here, in this village, means a logistical nightmare wrapped in social anxiety. You lie still for a moment, hoping it passes. It doesn't. You sit up slowly, groaning as your knees pop and your hips remind you that yesterday's trade hauling was not, in fact, a form of yoga. You glance around the longhouse. Most of the others are still asleep or pretending to be. You slip your boots on quietly, grab your outer cloak, and brace yourself. There are no toilets, no outhouses, no latrines with nice wooden seats and friendly spiders, just the woods beyond the edge of the village, a path worn into the mud by generations of awkward walks and squatted shame. You make your way there, stepping over tangled roots and ducking under branches, still wet with yesterday's rain. The wind picks up as if nature itself disapproves of your mission. You find a relatively hidden spot, do what must be done while balancing like a drunken heron, and use a handful of brittle grass in a way you never want to describe out loud. A historical fact: most early medieval settlements lacked any structured sanitation systems. Waste was typically deposited in pits, behind rocks, or wherever someone felt momentarily invisible. Disease spread easily, especially in damp environments. Like coastal Scandinavia, you try not to think about that as you shuffle back into the village, a changed person. By the time you return, the day has begun. Smoke curls out of the longhouse chimney, and people are already hauling buckets, stacking wood, and muttering greetings in the universal language of exhaustion. You're called over to a small circle of women sitting beside a shallow trench. They hand you a long stick with a jagged end and point to the ground. Today's job? Digging a new waste channel to divert runoff from the fish racks. Glamorous. The soil is heavy, wet, and full of roots. Your stick is barely sharper than a loaf of rye bread. You stab, scoop, lift, and repeat. Every few strokes, the blade gets stuck, and you have to kick the handle or wrestle it free with both hands. Your palms blister quickly. You try switching hands. Doesn't help. You keep digging. The trench slowly takes shape, crooked, shallow, slightly embarrassing, but functional. A fringe historical tidbit. Some Viking settlements near riverbanks developed basic drainage systems using angled trenches and stone channels to keep fish processing areas from flooding. These weren't engineered marvels, but they worked, usually. You pause to admire your trench, which already has water trickling through it. You choose to believe it's runoff, not sewage. You might be wrong. The woman beside you smiles faintly, then points to your feet. You look down. Your boot is submerged. Of course it is. You slosh away from the trench and spend the next half hour moving buckets of gray water from one corner of the village to another. No one explains why. Possibly no one knows. That's just how things work here. Quiet chaos disguised as routine. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your sense of personal space. A goat follows you around all morning, chewing on your cloak every time you stop. You try shooing it. Gently, it headbutts your knee. You give up and accept its company. You name it regret. After a short break by the fire, a luxury of 5 minutes spent staring into smoke, you're sent to fetch fresh water. This involves walking to the stream outside the village with 2 wooden pails, dipping them without falling in and hauling them back full. The handles dig into your palms. The water sloshes onto your legs. One pail leaks, but no one cares. You consider spilling both and pretending they were stolen by bandits. No one would believe you. You keep walking. Historians still argue whether water management was a conscious system or an accidental miracle in these coastal villages. You lean toward miracle. The fact that anyone stayed clean enough to survive winter seems less like planning and more like brute stubbornness. You spend the early afternoon scrubbing wooden boards used for fish butchering. The smell is embedded in the grain. You pour hot water from a kettle, scrub with a brittle brush, and try to ignore the fact that your hands now smell permanently of brine and old blood. When you're done, someone hands you a new task. Firewood. Always firewood. You follow 2 others to the edge of the forest and start collecting fallen branches. The trees here are tall, thin, creaking softly in the wind, like they're exchanging gossip. You find a good branch, stomp on it to break it in half, and carry it back under your arm. Repeat 20 times. By the end, your back feels like it's been filled with gravel. As the sun begins to fade behind the heavy clouds, the village shifts gears. People move slower, voices soften. Someone lights the torches near the longhouse. Children chase each other with fish bones tied to strings. A dog barks and is ignored. You sit on a low stool, sipping thin broth and watching steam rise from the pot. And then the thing happens. A man slips on the muddy path near the racks and lands in the drainage trench you dug earlier. He doesn't say anything at first, just lies there, soaking in the grimy water, staring up at the sky like it personally betrayed him. Then he stands dripping, mutters a word you don't understand, but instinctively feel, and limps off. No. One laughs, but later someone claps you on the back and says something that might have meant good trench. Dinner is plain today. No stew, no fish sausage, just roasted root vegetables and hard bread. You eat slowly, chewing each bite like it's a job. You stare at the fire and think about plumbing, heated floors, a warm toilet seat. You think about never seeing fish again. Then you think about the trench. You built something. It worked. Kind of, and the tunic? Still damp? But today it's earned its place in the village. So have you. You wake up to the sound of fish slapping wood. Not metaphorically. Literal fish, being dropped one by one onto a flat surface somewhere just outside. The longhouse. The rhythm is dull, wet, final. It somehow feels more personal than it should. You don't even open your eyes right away because you already know what today holds. More labor, more dampness, more silent expectations. Your legs ache like they've been replaced with sacks of wet grain. Your back refuses to stretch without protest. Your shoulders are locked in a posture that screams, "I carried things I didn't understand." Still, you sit up, because that's what everyone does. Sleep here isn't rest. It's just a pause between demands. You shuffle toward the door, rubbing your face with one sleeve, which unfortunately still smells like smoke, fish, and mild failure. Outside, the morning mist clings to everything like an old grudge. You don't need to ask where you're going. Your body moves automatically toward the racks. As you near them, you notice something strange. People aren't working. They're watching. A group has gathered in a loose semicircle near the center of the village, murmuring softly, eyes focused on something you can't quite see. You edge closer and spot the cause of the tension. Two men standing opposite each other, one holding a massive fish, the other holding a smaller one. They aren't talking. They're just staring, postures stiff, faces blank. Then, without warning, one drops his fish to the ground with theatrical flair. The other follows suit. A third man steps forward, points at the larger fish, and nods. The crowd hums in approval. You've just witnessed a judgment of social hierarchy based on fish size. A historical fact. In tightly knit Viking communities, social standing wasn't just about bloodlines or battle prowess. It was also shaped by economic contributions. How much you caught, what you traded, and how well you endured the grind. A man who brought in a dozen eels could outrank someone who returned empty-handed from a raid. This was survival status, and apparently today it's about whose cod is thicker. You try not to laugh. That would be rude. You back away and return to your unofficial role of doing whatever needs doing, which this morning turns out to be moving bundles of dried fish from the racks to the smokehouse for final curing. You lift one over your shoulder. It smells like brine and old boots. The cord cuts into your collarbone and you wobble slightly on the muddy path, but you make it. To the smokehouse without slipping. Small victories. Inside, the air is dense with heat and wood smoke. Fish hang from every beam, swaying slightly in the convection currents. Your eyes water within minutes. The woman managing the fire nods at you and gestures toward an empty hook. You hang the bundle, wipe your face, and try not to cough too loud. Then, just as you think you're done, someone points toward the far side of the smokehouse where a row of fish has collapsed in a heap. The ropes snapped. Your job now? Retie, rehang, and pretend you weren't just planning to sneak out early. You crouch, gather the fish, still warm, still oily, and begin looping string through their gills again, your fingers sticky, sore, and trembling slightly from yesterday's trench work. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your understanding of rest. Once the fish are back up, you step outside and are immediately sent to help with an odd task, counting fish. You laugh when they tell you, thinking it's a joke. It's not. Someone has carved tallies into a plank and your job is to confirm how many fish were dried, smoked, or eaten since the last moon. You count, recount, mark, and get confused by eels. You start again. A fringe historical tidbit. Some Norse villages used carved fish boards to keep track of surplus stock. These boards, marked with notches and symbols, were passed from one keeper to the next, often kept in the longhouse rafters like sacred ledgers. You try not to miscount, but your brain is foggy. After your fifth correction, the elder overseeing you sighs loudly and takes the board away. You're sent to do something simpler, eel duty. No one warned you that eels are terrifying up close. They writhe, they bite. They slip out of your grip with supernatural ease. You're given gloves that barely help and a wooden pail half full of them. Your task is to separate the dead from the not yet dead. You stare into the pail, mildly horrified. One of them blinks at you. You blink back. The contest ends in a draw. You manage the task barely. Your gloves are shredded. Your wrists sting. You walk the pail to the curing hut and trip over a loose stone. Eels fly everywhere. Two land in your hood. You scream internally. Externally, you just freeze while someone nearby mutters what you assume is either encouragement or a prayer. You gather the eels. They do not thank you. By the time the sun begins to dip, You've touched more marine creatures than you ever wanted in your entire life. You've counted fish, tied fish, stacked fish, debated fish, and been judged by the size of other people's fish. You're starting to understand that in this place, social order is enforced not by law or language, but by the invisible weight of contribution. No one tells you what your rank is, but you feel it. Historians still debate whether these kinds of status displays were formal or spontaneous. Was there an unspoken cod-based caste system, or just a collective agreement on who smelled the most like success? You suspect the truth is both. Dinner is, predictably, fish stew. But tonight, there's a little barley in it, and someone adds herbs. You can't identify them, but they almost make the dish feel new. You eat in silence, then sit near the fire long after your bowl is empty, watching the flames flicker and hearing the wind shift outside. And that tunic? Still damp, still clingy, but now, strangely, it carries a certain respect. Not just soaked cloth, but proof. You hauled, counted, lifted, and endured. You've been noticed. Even if no one says it, you know. You're part of the rhythm. Now, you wake up to a dream of warmth. Not actual warmth, your body is still wrapped in damp wool and yesterday's fish, but the illusion of it, the kind that flickers just before you fully return to reality. You hold on to it for a few seconds, eyes still closed, savoring the imagined embrace of a blanket that doesn't smell like the underside of a dock. But then the cold creeps back in, settles behind your knees, curls beneath your ribs, and the illusion dissolves like everything else that once brought comfort. You sit up slowly, cracking joints one by one, and take a breath that tastes like soot and salted air. The longhouse is quieter than usual. People move slower. There's a heaviness to the room, not just physical, but emotional, a fatigue that has passed the body and landed in the soul. Outside, the village looks the same, but you feel different. You're tired in a way that can't be solved by sleep, a different kind of tired, one born from too many days spent wet, cold, sore, judged and expected to keep going. And yet, you do. Because today is still a day, and in this place, days. Don't care how you feel. You're sent to the drying racks again, but not to hang fish this time. Today, you're to help clean the area, scrub the poles, sweep the space, remove debris. It seems simple, until you realize the poles are coated in hardened fish slime, dried blood, and whatever the wind blew in over the past few weeks. You're handed a stiff brush, a bucket of lukewarm water with something floating in it, and a broken cloth. That's your toolkit. You start scrubbing. The slime doesn't yield easily. You have to lean into it, scraping layer by layer until your arms burn and your back tenses up again. The bristles cut into your palm. The cold water stings. Your knuckles, the smell rises like a ghost, half decayed, half pickled, entirely foul. You gag once, then keep going. No one is watching, but you work like they are. A historical fact. Hygiene in Viking settlements was better than many assume. Combs, tweezers, and even ear spoons were common, and Saturday bathing was a cultural norm. But sanitation around work, sites, especially fishing areas, was rudimentary at best. Cleanliness was a personal matter. The rest was just tolerated grime. You pause to rub your shoulder, glance at the other poles, and realize you're only a quarter of the way through. Hours pass. Your clothes soak through again. Your gloves tear open at the fingertips, and you now smell like a fermented dock rope. Eventually, someone tosses you a chunk of hard cheese and a stale piece of bread. Lunch. You chew it slowly while staring at the ocean, which rolls in like it owns the world. It probably does. Then it's back to scrubbing. Your mind begins to wander. You think about cities, cafes, carpet, the soft rumble of a dryer finishing a load of clothes, the quiet joy of clean socks. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is the part of your brain that remembers what dry skin feels like. You're then sent to repair the walkways between the huts. wooden planks laid across the mud to keep people from sinking ankle deep every time it rains. Some are broken, some are gone. You carry replacement boards, most of them warped, some with nails still embedded. You remove the bad planks, hammer in new ones using a rock and sheer willpower, and try not to step into the muck you're covering. You fail. Repeatedly. A fringe historical tidbit. Some settlements in swampier regions used crushed mussel shells and gravel to stabilize their paths. This village did not. Your boot sinks halfway to your shin, and it takes 2 men and a pole to pull you free. No one laughs. No one has the energy. Later, as the sky darkens prematurely under a thick blanket of clouds, you're given one more task: hay rotation. The bedding in the longhouse is made of straw and dried grass, and it must be replaced regularly or mold sets in. You carry armfuls of musty hay to a pit on the edge of the woods and dump it in, then haul new bundles from the barn. The hay sticks to your sweat, you itch immediately, you sneeze and no one says anything. Back in the longhouse, you help spread the fresh hay across the sleeping mats. It smells better somehow, dry, soft, almost golden. You sink to your knees, let the fibers slip through your fingers, and for a moment, you allow yourself to feel human again, until someone walks in tracking mud and tosses a damp cloak onto your corner. You say nothing. You've learned your place. Historians still argue whether emotional fatigue was acknowledged in Viking culture or whether it was simply absorbed into the communal grind. The sagas speak of warriors, gods, storms, and fate, but they rarely mention the weariness of day 72 in a wet fishing village with no soap. Dinner is thinner than usual, mostly broth with a few floating root vegetables and scraps of fish too small for drying. You eat slowly, silently. Around the fire, people barely speak. They sit in flickering light, faces hollowed by habit, not hunger. You recognize that look now. You've worn it yourself. That night, as you lie back into the fresh hay, your body thanks you, then immediately reminds you of everything you've done wrong. Your arms pulse, your hips ache, your wrists feel like brittle twigs. You close your eyes and try not to dream about scrubbing poles or replacing planks. And that tunic? Still damp, always damp. But now it carries the weight of familiarity. Like the rest of this place, it no longer surprises you. It just exists, like you do. You wake to the sound of the wind screaming, not howling, not whispering, screaming, a constant, teeth-rattling gale that pushes against the longhouse walls like it's trying to peel them off the earth. The fire has long since burned out, and the cold has crept in through every crack in the timber. You're wrapped in your blanket, but it's no use. The chill has claimed your limbs like an old debt. You sit up slowly, eyes half shut, and immediately feel the change in air pressure. Something is different. You stand, wobble once, then brace yourself and step outside. The sky is a bruised gray-green, heavy with clouds that look like they've never seen the sun. Rain isn't falling yet, but the scent of it is thick and sharp in the air. Down by the shoreline, people are running, not panicked but purposeful. There's no shouting, just movement. You follow instinctively, pulled by the tension you now recognize as collective dread. Today, you're not fishing, you're storm prepping. There's no list of instructions, no emergency siren, no laminated plan posted on a wall. Just experience and muscle memory. You're directed toward the racks, those tall skeletal frames where dozens of fish still hang, halfway dried. The first order of business is unhooking as many as possible before the winds rip them down. You climb onto the lower beams, fingers shaking as you reach for bundles of salted cod. The wind tugs at your arms, whistles through the wood, and makes your hair slap you in the face like a wet rope. A historical fact: Viking coastal communities were particularly vulnerable to sudden storms. Their survival relied on intuition, fast decision-making, and sometimes luck. They built low, sturdy, and close to one another, not just for warmth, but for resilience. You feel that logic now as every hand in the village moves without wasted motion. You manage to lower 3 bundles of fish before someone taps your shoulder and gestures inland. You're needed at the boats. Down at the shoreline, the longboats and skiffs have been pulled higher up the slope, but they're still tied with thin rope and hope. You're handed a fresh coil of line, told to reinforce the moorings. The wind shoves at you with every step. You nearly lose your balance twice. Your cloak catches a gust and flaps open, snapping like a desperate flag. You drop to your knees and begin tying thick knots around the boat's posts, securing it to stone anchors. Embedded deep into the earth, your fingers are slow, the rope is stiff, the knot doesn't hold. You try again. This time it does, barely. The waves have begun to churn below, gray, frothing, not yet violent, but impatient. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your grip. Strength? Someone calls out, short, sharp syllables, and you're pulled toward the storage hut next. Inside, baskets of salt, bundles of herbs, and rows of dried fish are stacked precariously on shelves. You're told to move what you can to the longhouse, quickly. You grab a bundle and immediately regret it. It's heavier than it looks. You carry it awkwardly, pressed against your chest, slipping on wet stones as you cross the village. Your boots splash through standing water. The first drops begin to fall, sharp and cold. Back and forth you go, moving supplies as the wind thickens and the rain picks up speed. Your tunic sticks to your skin, saturated again within minutes. Your legs ache, your shoulders burn, and your vision blurs from sweat and rain and something very close to exhaustion. A fringe historical tidbit. During storms, some Norse villages invoke the favor of Njord, the god of sea and wind, by leaving small fish wrapped in straw at the edges of the village. You see a few of these offerings tucked into fence posts, barely visible in the downpour. You pause a moment beside one. You don't believe in sea gods, but right now, you're open to options. The rain turns sideways. It soaks everything instantly. You can barely hear over the roar of the wind. You help shutter windows, wedge beams across doorways, weigh down cloth-covered barrels with stones. Mud turns to soup beneath your feet. Someone hands you a mug of something warm, barely palatable, and you drink it in one gulp without asking what it is. It burns all the way down. You're grateful anyway. Historians still debate how well early settlements weathered these kinds of storms. Some records show years when villages vanished entirely, washed out or starved during the following winter. Others survived, rebuilt, and carried on as if nothing had happened. You wonder which kind this village is. You wonder which kind you are. By nightfall, the rain hasn't stopped, but the wind dies a little. Inside the longhouse, people strip soaked cloaks, lay wet wood near the hearth, and try to dry what can be dried. You hang your tunic near the fire. It steams. You sit wrapped in a scrap of wool, watching droplets slide down the wooden walls. Like tiny messengers, dinner is bread and silence. No one has the energy to talk. Some people sit with their eyes closed, not sleeping, just existing. A few whisper prayers. One man hums a song beneath his breath, low, mournful, familiar even, though you've never heard it, and the tunic? Still damp, wetter in fact, but tonight no one expects otherwise. Even the air inside the house is soaked. You lie down in fresh hay, still shivering slightly, and stare at the ceiling beams. You listen to the storm pushing against the outside world. You hope the knots hold. You hope the fish don't spoil. You hope you're dry before spring. You wake in darkness, not from noise, but from silence. The storm has passed. The wind has stopped. And what remains is that eerie calm, the apuam kind that presses in on your ears and makes every breath feel louder than it should. For a moment, you lie still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling of the long house, while the heavy hush presses down on everything like a damp wool blanket. The fire is out. Just a whisper of ash and memory in the center of the room. Around you, the others still sleep, twisted in their cloaks and blankets, their bodies curled like old roots. Your joints are stiff. Your muscles ache in places that feel new. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes, and stretch until something in your back clicks in quiet defiance. Outside, the village looks pale and worn. The sky is white with early fog, and the ground is churned into thick, uneven mud. The air smells, clean for once, washed out, empty, even gentle. It won't last. You move carefully, your boots sucking at the ground with every step, and find yourself called over to the edge of the village. A few others are already there, huddled around a toppled rack. It didn't survive the storm. The wood is split, the supports half sunken into the mud, the fish gone, either blown into the sea or buried somewhere beneath the sludge. No one curses, no one weeps. They just look at it the way you'd look at a family dog that didn't wake. Up, your task is to rebuild. You're handed a bundle of stakes, a small wooden mallet, and a length of cord. The tools are primitive, the materials soaked and warped. The mud threatens to swallow everything. Still, you work. First, pulling up the splintered remains, then clearing space with a shovel that was once a plank. Your hands are slow, your arms trembling with yesterday's weight, but there's no choice. The rack must stand again. A historical fact. Viking, coastal communities relied so heavily on their drying racks that losing even one could set the entire village back weeks. It wasn't just infrastructure, it was survival. Fish that couldn't be dried couldn't be stored, and fish that couldn't be stored meant hunger. You drive the first stake deep into the mud with a few stubborn strikes. The sound is dull, muffled by wet earth. Others join in. No one talks much. Tools pass silently from hand to hand. Knots are tied. Beams are lifted. Slowly, the skeleton of the rack begins to take shape again, crooked but determined. You bind the joints tightly, fingers raw from friction, nails packed with mud. Every so often you stop to stretch your back, but not for long. The mist thickens. Time crawls. At midday, someone brings you a bowl of broth. It's thin and bitter, but warm. You sip it while sitting on a stone, watching the rebuilt rack sway slightly in the breeze. A child walks by, dragging a stick through the mud like it's a sword. You nod, they nod back. That's all. Then you're sent down to the shoreline to collect what the storm left behind. The beach is strewn with debris, broken wood, torn nets, dead fish, seaweed, things that once belonged to boats or maybe people. You pick through it with a burlap sack, collecting whatever might still be useful. Most of it isn't. A few lengths of rope, a bent hook, half a paddle. You carry it back anyway. A fringe historical tidbit. After large storms, Viking villagers often combed the beach not just for salvage, but for omens. Strange items from distant ships or driftwood carved by unknown hands were sometimes taken as signs. You find a piece of bone shaped like a rune. You don't know what it means. You pocket it anyway. By late afternoon, the fog lifts and the full damage is visible. A storage hut lost part of its roof. Several fish baskets were flattened. But the boat somehow survived. The knots held. Your knots held. You feel a flicker of pride, small and stubborn, wedged between the soreness in your back and the mud in your socks. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so is your resistance to this place. You stopped fighting it somewhere between the fifth eel and the second storm. You no longer ask when you'll leave. You just carry what needs carrying, fix what needs fixing, and try not to get caught standing still. As the sun dips behind the hills, gold light filters across the village for the first time in days. The dampness lingers, but there's a gentleness in the air. Someone plays a soft tune on a carved flute. It drifts through the longhouse like smoke. You sit with the others, knees drawn up, cloak draped around your shoulders, eating roasted roots and watching embers rise. No one speaks of the storm. No one has to. It's over, but the work it left behind is not. You feel it in your fingers, in your shoulders, in the quiet glances shared across the firelight. You're part of something now, Not glorious, not grand, but real, tangible. You built a rack, you tied the boats, you survived the screaming wind, and that tunic, still damp. But tonight, it smells more like smoke than sea. And that somehow feels like progress. You wake to the sound of your own breath. Not loud but present, measured, slow. For the first time, your body doesn't protest when you shift on your mat. It just creaks quietly, like old wood that has finally settled. The longhouse is still. The fire has burned low again, but the chill no longer bites the same way. Either the hay's gotten softer, or you've stopped noticing how scratchy it is. The weight of your tunic still damp at the cuffs and hem no longer startles you. You rise, not because someone tells you to, but because the day is waiting. Outside, the village glows in a soft gold light, washed by last night's rain and still cloaked in mist. There is a strange peace here now, like the storm pressed everything into place and left behind only what mattered. You step out slowly, boots sinking gently into the earth, and breathe. It's quiet. Not the silence of absence, but of calm. And that calm doesn't last, of course, because work begins the moment someone spots you. You're directed to the edge of the beach, where yesterday's salvage has been sorted into piles, wood, rope, fish, and everything else. Your job is final sorting. You lift broken beams, carry wet cloth, unravel netting that smells like algae and old regret. You move slowly, not because you're lazy, but because the rhythm is familiar now. You know how to conserve energy. You know not to overreach when your shoulder's still healing. You know not to shake out a net without checking for crabs. Historical fact. Final repair days were essential in post-storm recovery for early coastal villages. Damage wasn't always catastrophic, but even small losses added up. One broken rack, one ruined batch of drying fish, one tangled rope. These were the kinds of days that made or broke the coming week. You tie off the end of a repaired net with more confidence than you thought you had. The knot holds. The fibers stretch tight, then settle. Later, you're told to help dig a new fire pit near the smokehouse, the old one having flooded during the storm. You don't complain. You've dug worse. You and another man work side by side, neither of you saying much. You pass the shovel back and forth, clear out ash and soaked earth, and line the pit with flat stones. When it's done, he pats your shoulder once. Brief, solid, the kind of gesture that says more than words. You spend the rest of the afternoon splitting fish. They're fresher today, newly caught, still twitching in some cases. You don't flinch anymore. The blade moves cleanly in your hand. Your cuts are straight. The meat peels apart like pages. You don't rush. You just work, focused, present. Meanwhile, your phone is dead. But so is the part of you that keeps asking what day it is. You no longer count. You measure time and tasks completed, in weight carried, in how the smoke smells different when the wood is wet. A fringe historical tidbit. Some Norse families recorded storms and strange catches, not in writing, but in carved symbols along the beams of their longhouses. One small curl for high winds, a hooked line for fish found inland. You wonder if anyone's been keeping track of you. Probably not, but the marks are there all the same, in your hands, your clothes, the way your back feels stronger even when it aches. At twilight, you gather with the others for the final meal. It's not a feast, but it feels like one. The stew is thick. There's bread, real bread, not just rock-hard rations. Someone passes a bowl of dried berries soaked in something. Sweet, you chew slowly, tasting every bite. The firelight flickers across tired, lined faces, but the fatigue now carries something more. Pride, maybe. Completion. No one says you did well. No one needs to. You helped rebuild the rack. You tied the boats. You cooked. You hauled. You didn't fall apart when the wind came. That's as close to praise as you're going to get. You lie down early tonight. Not because you're exhausted, though you are, but because there's nothing more to do. The tools are stored. The fish are hanging. The sea is calm again. You pull your blanket up to your chest, curl slightly, and let your body go heavy against the hay. For the first time you feel settled, not comfortable. Not happy, just here, part of it. And the tunic, still damp. But it doesn't matter anymore. You've stopped noticing. It's part of your story now. Tonight, you've traveled far, not in miles, but in moments, through cold winds and colder, water through thick mud and fish guts, and long hours that blurred into each other like smoke in a still room. You've woken on straw that wasn't yours, stood in silence beside strangers, watched storms carve the sky and wondered if the village would still be standing come morning. But you endured in small stubborn ways. You found rhythm in repetition, strength in slowness, and something almost sacred in the shared drudgery of survival. Let yourself breathe now. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts slow, like the sea after a storm. You don't need to lift anything else tonight. There's no more wood to carry, no more rope to tie, no fish to gut. Just this quiet. Just the soft hush of fog over water, the steady drip of rain on old beams, the creak of wood that's been weathered but never broken. Let the sounds fade one by one. Let the flickering firelight behind your eyes dim and go still. Feel the heaviness in your limbs, the way your fingers soften, your breath deepens. You've done enough, more than enough. And now the world can turn without you for a while. You're safe, you're still. And though your clothes are damp, your spirit is dry, and your story, at least for tonight, can rest. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Sleep well and dream slow.